I walked into that red carpet event and saw my husband posing with another woman for photos as a married couple. Everyone thought she was his wife. For 2 years, he erased me completely. What I did next on live television destroyed his world in 60 seconds. Before we dive into this revenge story that had Hollywood talking for weeks, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. Ring that bell, because stories like this, where the underestimated woman gets the last laugh, these are the stories that change lives. Let's go. You know that feeling when everything in your life looks perfect from the outside, but something deep in your gut keeps telling you that something's wrong. That was my life for 2 whole years. My name is Alicia, and I thought I was living the dream. I had built a successful marketing agency from the ground up, working with some of the biggest brands in Los Angeles. My campaigns had won awards, my client list was impressive, and I was making the kind of money that let me sleep well at night. And then there was Brandon. God, I loved that man. He was this charming, ambitious film producer who swept me off my feet 3 years ago at a coffee shop in West Hollywood. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the room when he looked at me. We got married after a year of dating, and for the first year of our marriage, everything felt like a fairy tale. Brandon's career in Hollywood was taking off. He was producing indie films that were getting attention, making connections with bigger studios, and slowly climbing that ladder that everyone in this town dreams of climbing. I was so proud of him. I would brag to my friends about his projects, show up to his smaller premieres, and I genuinely believed we were building this amazing life together. But then something started to shift. It was subtle at first. Brandon would come home from work and tell me about these amazing industry parties he'd been to, these networking dinners, these exclusive events. But when I'd ask why he didn't invite me, he always had an excuse ready. Oh, you were working late on that campaign. It was just boring business stuff. You wouldn't have enjoyed it. You don't really know anyone in that crowd anyway. At first, I believed him. I was busy with my own career, and honestly, I thought he was just being considerate. Maybe he was right that I wouldn't enjoy standing around making small talk with film executives all night. But as months went by, I started to notice that I never met his industry friends. Not a single one. In 3 years together, I had never been introduced to the people he spent half his time with. That's when I started paying attention to his social media, and what I saw made my stomach drop. There were photos from every event he claimed was boring or not worth my time. Photos of him laughing with groups of people, raising glasses at fancy restaurants, posing at premieres. He looked like he was having the time of his life at these events that apparently weren't important enough for his wife to attend. My friends started asking questions too. My best friend Carmen would say things like, "Girl, when are we going to meet these mysterious Hollywood friends of Brandon's?" And I'd make excuses for him. But deep down, I was starting to wonder the same thing. Why was I completely separate from this huge part of his life? Then I started noticing her. Chelsea. She was this blonde actress and model who kept appearing in Brandon's social media posts. At first, she was just in group photos, always perfectly positioned, always looking stunning. Brandon mentioned her sometimes as a business associate or someone he was helping with connections. I didn't think much of it initially because Brandon worked with a lot of people, but Chelsea started showing up more and more. There were photos of them at dinner together, just the two of them. Photos of them at industry events, standing close, looking comfortable. When I asked Brandon about these dinners, he'd brush it off. Oh, that was just business. She needed advice about her career. Always business. Always innocent. I wanted to trust my husband. I really did. But every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. Brandon was working later and later, taking mysterious phone calls that he'd step outside to answer, and our conversations about his work became increasingly vague. When I tried to dig deeper, he'd change the subject or accuse me of being paranoid. The breaking point came when I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. I know how that sounds, but I was going crazy with suspicion. and I needed to know the truth. Brandon told me he was going to a boring business dinner and would be home late, so I got in my car and followed him. He went to this upscale restaurant in Beverly Hills, and when I saw him walk in, I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Chelsea showed up. She was dressed to kill in this stunning red dress, and when she walked into that restaurant, Brandon stood up and pulled her into this long, intimate hug. They sat down at a corner table, and from where I was sitting in my car, I could see them holding hands across the table. I sat there for 2 hours watching my husband on what was obviously a romantic date with another woman. I watched him lean in close to talk to her, watched him reach over to touch her face, watched him signal for the check and help her with her coat like a perfect gentleman. When they walked out together, he had his arm around her waist, and they were laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I drove home in a daze and pretended to be asleep when Brandon came home at midnight, reeking of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. The next morning, he acted completely normal, asking about my day, making coffee, discussing weekend plans, like he hadn't just spent the evening on a date with another woman. That's when I decided to become a detective in my own marriage. I started digging deeper into their relationship, and what I found was so much worse than just an affair. Chelsea wasn't just Brandon's side piece. She was his public girlfriend. She was the woman he introduced to his industry friends. She was the one who went to premieres with him, who attended networking events, who played the role of his partner in the world that mattered to his career. I found photos on industry websites from events where she was identified as Brandon's girlfriend. I found social media posts where she was tagged as his +1 to exclusive parties. There were even photos of them together where she was wearing what looked like an engagement ring, posing for photographers like they were an official couple. The most devastating discovery came when I found a video from an industry podcast where Brandon was interviewed about his upcoming projects. When the host asked about his personal life, Brandon talked about being in a relationship with an amazing woman who supports his career. He described Chelsea's acting work, talked about how proud he was of her, and spoke about their future together, like I didn't even exist. I realized that for 2 years, my husband had been living a double life. At home, he was married to me, but in every space that mattered for his career, every environment where he wanted to make connections and build his reputation, I had been completely erased. Chelsea was his public girlfriend, and I was his dirty little secret. The humiliation was crushing, but what made it worse was understanding why he was hiding me. It wasn't just about the affair. Brandon was ashamed of me. In an industry where image is everything, where who you're seen with can make or break your career, he had decided that his black wife wasn't the right look for his ambitions. Chelsea, with her blonde hair and blue eyes and Instagram-perfect appearance, was the kind of woman that would help his image in Hollywood. I was apparently the kind of woman who would hurt it. For weeks after this discovery, I went through every emotion you can imagine. I was heartbroken, furious, humiliated, and lost. I kept thinking about confronting him, but part of me was terrified of what that conversation would reveal about how he really felt about me. As long as I didn't say anything, I could pretend that maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation that would make this all make sense. But then the invitation arrived. It was addressed to Brandon and guest for the premiere of a major studio film. This wasn't just any industry event. This was the kind of red carpet premiere that gets covered by entertainment news, where photographers line up to capture every arrival, where careers can be made just by being seen at the right moment with the right people. Brandon saw the invitation and told me the same lie he'd been telling for 2 years. It's just work, babe. You'd be bored out of your mind. I'll probably just make an appearance and come home early. But I knew better now. I knew that Chelsea would be there as his date, playing the role of his devoted girlfriend, while I sat at home like the fool I'd been for 2 years. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to confront Brandon privately. I wasn't going to have some tearful conversation in our living room where he could manipulate me or gaslight me or make excuses. I was going to show up at that premiere and reclaim my place as his wife in the most public way possible. I spent 3 days preparing for that night. I bought a dress that was so stunning it should have come with a warning label. It was this deep emerald green that made my skin glow, fitted perfectly to show off every curve, with just enough elegance to be red carpet appropriate, but enough boldness to stop traffic. I got my hair and makeup done by the same team that works with A-list celebrities. I wanted to look so incredible that every camera would turn toward me the moment I stepped out of my car. The night of the premiere, I watched Brandon get ready and leave the house, telling me he'd be home by 11. 20 minutes later, I got in my car and drove to the same venue. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. But I was also filled with this incredible sense of purpose. For 2 years, I had let this man make me invisible. Tonight, I was going to make sure everyone saw me. When I arrived at the red carpet, the energy was electric. There were hundreds of photographers, entertainment reporters doing live broadcasts, and celebrities arriving in luxury cars. I had called ahead and gotten myself on the guest list using my industry connections. So when I gave my name at check-in, they waved me right through. I stepped onto that red carpet, and I could feel the shift in energy immediately. Photographers started taking pictures before they even knew who I was, just because I looked that good. I walked slowly, confidently, taking my time to let everyone get a good look, and then I saw them. Brandon and Chelsea were about 50 feet away, posing for a group of photographers. She was wearing this white dress that was beautiful but safe. The kind of dress that screams, "I'm trying to be America's sweetheart." Brandon was in a classic black tuxedo, looking handsome and successful, with his arm around her waist, like she belonged there. But what made my blood boil was hearing the photographers calling out to them, "Brandon, look this way. Chelsea, you look beautiful. Give us a kiss." And then I heard it, the thing that made me see red. "Mrs. Thompson, over here." They were calling her by my last name. She was posing for photos as Mrs. Thompson while wearing what looked like my husband's grandmother's wedding ring that I had never seen before. I walked closer, and that's when Brandon saw me. The color drained from his face so completely that I thought he might faint right there on the red carpet. Chelsea noticed his reaction and turned to see what he was looking at. And when her eyes met mine, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. But I wasn't done yet. I had spotted something even better than just confronting them in front of photographers. There was a reporter from Entertainment Tonight doing live interviews with celebrities as they arrived. This was my chance to not just embarrass them privately, but to expose the truth on live television. I walked over to where the reporter was interviewing another celebrity and waited for my moment. When their interview ended, I stepped forward with the biggest smile I could manage and said, "Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake." The reporter, recognizing that something interesting was about to happen, immediately turned her camera toward me. "I'm sorry, what kind of mistake?" she asked. I gestured toward Brandon and Chelsea, who were still posing for photos, but clearly watching our interaction with growing panic. "Well, I couldn't help but notice that you've been referring to that woman as Mrs. Thompson. But I'm afraid that's incorrect." I paused for dramatic effect. "I'm Mrs. Thompson, Alicia Thompson. That woman is posing for photos with my husband." The reporter's eyes went wide as she realized she was witnessing real Hollywood drama unfold live on television. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You're saying that's your husband?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied, maintaining my composure perfectly. "Brandon Thompson is my husband of 2 years. We're very happily married, though I have to admit, I'm a bit confused about why his business associate is wearing what appears to be a wedding ring and posing as his wife." By now, other reporters and photographers had started to notice the commotion. Cameras were turning toward us, and I could see Brandon walking quickly in our direction, his face a mask of panic. Chelsea had completely frozen, unsure whether to run or stay. The Entertainment Tonight reporter was experienced enough to recognize gold when she saw it. "Mrs. Thompson, are you saying that your husband has been publicly representing another woman as his wife?" "I'm not saying anything," I replied with a smile. "I'm simply correcting the record. I'm Alicia Thompson, founder and CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Group. We've won 3 industry awards this year for our campaigns, and I'm proud of the work we do with major brands across the country. I just wanted to make sure that if anyone was going to be called Mrs. Thompson tonight, it should probably be the actual Mrs. Thompson." That's when something magical happened. The reporter's expression changed completely. "Wait, Alicia Thompson from Pinnacle Marketing. You're the woman behind the campaign that won the Gold Lion at Cannes this year? I hadn't expected this, but I wasn't going to waste the opportunity." "That's right. It was an incredible honor to represent our client on that international stage. Suddenly, I wasn't just the wronged wife, causing drama on the red carpet. I was a successful businesswoman who had achieved something that impressed even jaded entertainment reporters." The dynamic of the entire interview shifted. Instead of being treated like a scorned woman making a scene, I was being treated like a celebrity in my own right. More reporters started gathering around us, asking about my work, my company, my achievements. Photographers began taking pictures of me alone, recognizing that I was the real story of the evening. Meanwhile, Brandon finally reached us, looking like he was about to have a panic attack. "Alicia," he said, trying to smile for the cameras, while his voice shook. "What are you doing here?" I turned to him with the sweetest smile I could manage. "Hi, honey. I thought I'd surprise you at your work event. I hope you don't mind. I was just introducing myself to everyone since it seems like they didn't know you were married." The reporter immediately jumped on this. "Brandon, can you comment on the confusion about your marital status? This woman says she's your wife, but you've been photographed extensively with Chelsea Morrison as your girlfriend." Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked back and forth between me, the reporter, and the cameras, clearly trying to figure out how to explain his way out of this situation. But there was no explanation that would work. He had been caught in the most public way possible. Chelsea, who had been standing frozen this entire time, finally made a decision. She turned and walked quickly away from the cameras, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. Smart woman. She knew when to cut her losses. "I think there's been some confusion," Brandon finally managed to say. "Alicia and we've been having some personal issues." "Oh no, honey," I interrupted, still smiling brightly. "I think you're confused. We haven't been having any issues at all. At least, I haven't. You've been telling me how happy you are, how much you love me, how proud you are of my work. Just this morning, you made me coffee and told me you couldn't wait to spend the weekend together. Did something change between this morning and tonight that I should know about?" The reporter was eating this up. Live television drama between a successful Hollywood producer and his accomplished wife, while his apparent girlfriend fled the scene. This was the kind of content that would be talked about for weeks. Other celebrities and industry people had started to gather around, sensing that something major was happening. I recognized several actors, directors, and producers in the crowd, all of them watching this disaster unfold. Brandon's reputation was being destroyed in real time, in front of exactly the people whose opinions mattered most for his career. That's when I decided to deliver the final blow. "You know what, though? I should probably thank you, Brandon. For 2 years, you've been telling me that I wouldn't fit in at these industry events, that I wouldn't understand the business, that these weren't the kind of places where I belonged. But looking around tonight, seeing all these successful, creative, intelligent people, I realize you were wrong. I fit in just fine. The question is whether you do." I turned back to the reporter. "I want to thank everyone for such a warm welcome tonight. It's been wonderful to finally meet Brandon's colleagues and to be here representing not just my own company, but all the women who've been told they don't belong in spaces where they absolutely do belong." I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And with that, I walked away. I walked down that red carpet like I owned it. Photographers calling my name, reporters shouting questions, and I got in my car and drove home. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within an hour, video clips of the confrontation were all over social media. # red carpet drama was trending on Twitter. Entertainment news outlets were picking up the story, and by morning, it was everywhere. The narrative wasn't wife causes scene at premiere. The narrative was successful businesswoman exposes cheating husband's double life. People were impressed by how I handled myself, how gracious I was under pressure, how accomplished I was in my own right. I started getting interview requests, speaking opportunities, and new business inquiries. My company's profile shot through the roof overnight. I went from being Brandon's hidden wife to being Alicia Thompson, the woman who refused to stay invisible. Brandon, on the other hand, was finished. The story painted him as dishonest, manipulative, and shallow. Industry people started questioning his character, wondering what other lies he might be telling in his business dealings. Projects he was working on suddenly didn't have room for him anymore. His phone stopped ringing with opportunities. Chelsea's career took a hit too. She was portrayed as the other woman who was complicit in deceiving everyone about Brandon's marital status. She lost several endorsement deals and had to deal with the public backlash from people who saw her as a homewrecker. As for our marriage, well, that was over the moment I walked onto that red carpet. Brandon tried to come home that night and explain. Tried to make excuses about how he was protecting me from the superficial Hollywood world, how he was worried about my feelings, how Chelsea meant nothing to him. But I was done listening to lies. 6 months later, I'm living my best life. The divorce was finalized, and I got everything I deserved and more. My business is thriving beyond anything I could have imagined. I've been invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship, resilience, and knowing your worth. I've written a book about my experience that's being published next year. I've started dating someone who's proud to be seen with me anywhere, anytime. Brandon is still trying to rebuild his career, but in a town where reputation is everything, some mistakes are hard to come back from. Chelsea moved to New York to try to restart her acting career away from the Hollywood gossip mill. And me? I learned that you should never let anyone make you small enough to fit into their world. If they can't handle how bright you shine, that's their problem, not yours. I spent 2 years dimming my light for a man who wasn't worthy of it in the first place. Never again. The most beautiful part of this whole story is that by trying to hide me, Brandon actually gave me the biggest platform I've ever had. That red carpet moment changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting or scheming. Sometimes it's just showing up and being undeniably, unapologetically yourself. That live TV moment broke the internet and changed Alicia's life forever. If you're tired of being hidden, dismissed, or replaced, this is your sign to step into your spotlight. Hit that like button if this story gave you chills. Share it with every queen who needs to remember her power. Drop a crown emoji in the comments if you're ready to stop being anyone's secret. Subscribe, because we're just getting started with these revenge stories. Your throne is waiting, beautiful.